Hi, Sneak Peekers. I'm Gavin. I'm here with Izzy and Owen and Adam Elliot. And Mr. Elliot here is the writer and director of the new film, Memoir of a Snail. It's a bit,
Oh
I,
wow, you got one. Oh
yes.
look, I got one too.
Oh my gosh.
Yay.
That's
Except
so great.
mine's the real one.
Yeah, this one's got probably a little bit of a copy quality too. Is that like
Yeah,
one of the ones used in the film?
yeah. Yeah. We had
Oh
about
wow.
15 of it, but this is the real one with arms that
Oh
come
wow.
off, eyeballs that move. We can move the little pupils
That's
around.
so cool.
Oh, that's awesome.
So,
Well, I guess to go ahead and start things off, I kind of want to ask a little bit about the preparation process behind this film because I know principal photography took 33 weeks, but this movie has obviously been in development for many, many, many years before that. And so I guess I would like to kind of hear from you maybe what some of that pre-production process looks like and kind of what the planning that goes into a claymation and stop motion film like this one ends up looking like.
Sure. Well, excuse me. It took 8 years, but that's from script to screen. So it's a bit deceiving because strangely, the way I animate and the way my animators animate is actually quite expedient and economical and efficient. So really what was the slowest part of the process was actually the writing. It took longer to write than it did to make, which is usually the reverse sometimes with films. And it took about 3 years, about 16 drafts. Uh, so that was the slowest part. Then while that was happening, we were trying to finance, and that took roughly 3 years to raise all the millions of dollars we needed. And then pre-production, well, even before we had pre-production, and that's where I did the storyboard and the animatic. And I'm very old-fashioned. I still do my storyboards on paper. I
Mhm.
even cut out the little squares with a ruler and knife, and I have my own little procedure. So I hand drew 1,500 storyboard panels, and that's really where I formalized the script and really lock things in. And then I started doing the character design, the props, the set, the whole production design. So then I went and drew everything that was in the storyboard. So essentially, I drew everything twice, but in more detail. So I did another, I've no idea, 3 or 4 thousand production design drawings. And then we started making the film, and it took 16 weeks of pre-production to make the 200 sets, 200 characters, and we guessed between 5 and 7,000 little snails props. And then it took as you said, 33 weeks to shoot, 7 animators doing roughly 5 to 10 seconds per day.
Wow.
And then 6 months of post-production where the music was composed, we recorded the orchestra, editing, all those post things. So yeah, 8 years script to screen. And of course, COVID
Mm,
was the spanner in the works that slowed everything down.
of course, yeah. Izzy, do you want to ask the next
No,
question?
I will. I'll take the next question. Hi, I'm Izzy. First, I wanted to thank you for meeting with us. It is so nice to meet you. I loved the film. I love how you handcrafted every single piece and how like open the film was in exploring like more like personal issues. That's kind of leading into my first question. Being a queer person who grew up in the church, I was really struck by Gilbert's plotline, and so I was wondering why you thought it was necessary to include that in the film.
Sure. Well, look, I was brought up with religion as well, and every Sunday I would go to Sunday school and give over my pocket money to the priests. uh, and there was a dodgy priest in our church. And then I went to high school, and that was a religious boys' school, so we sang hymns every day. What struck me too was at the first class of the day we'd have religious studies and learn about creationism, And then the second class we'd have was science, and we'd learn about evolution. So we were very confused by the third class. It's like all these contradictions. And, and then I became very interested in religion and all religions and how the good, the bad, the ugly. And I wanted to, in this film, include my views on organized religion, not religion per se, but organized religions or cults. Some would argue some of the biggest religions in the world are cults, and just how anti-Christian a lot of religious groups are, and that they really are quite cruel and traumatizing and exploitative. And we all know the bad ones. And so that was, and as a gay person myself, I've had friends, luckily I haven't, but I've had friends who've had conversion therapy, and it is so damaging, so cruel, and more often than not, inflicted by their own parents. So, with each film, I do try and include challenging subject matter, because I think that's the job of a writer and director, is to push the boundaries and evolve the art form. I don't see animation as a genre. It's a medium and vehicle to tell any story you want, no matter how dark. So yeah, I love challenging subject matter. I certainly don't want to offend audiences, but I do want to I do want to create thought-provoking material, but at the same time, entertain and make them laugh.
Thank you. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, hi, my name's Owen. From what I understand, claymation is a very tedious process when it comes to conveying on screen. Were there any moments in particular, particularly that were hard to convey on screen in claymation?
Oh, wow. Yes. Nearly all of them. I mean, it is such a ridiculous art form. I mean, I was talking to a group last night, and I think I depressed everyone because it is such a challenging mathematics. There's a lot of mathematics in the art form, and I'm terrible at mathematics. It is very intuitive at times. I've got a wonderful animation supervisor, John Lewis, who's brilliant with physics and mathematics and how does a ball bounce and all the really tricky aspects of animating. And I don't animate anymore because I'm just not good at it. I just it is tedious from my perspective. But my animators love it. They love the challenge. They call themselves solutionists, and they love solving problems. And so I'm very lucky. I'm surrounded by problem solvers, a wonderful cinematographer, and incredible art department and sculptors. And, they're all artists. A lot of them had never worked on a film until this one. But in terms of shots, I would say the very first shot in the film was probably the biggest challenge, because it's the longest shot in the film. All those thousands of some of these actually behind me, we used some of these, all had to be glued together. And then we had a giant robotic arm that came in with a very small camera lens on the bottom, and it had to move frame at a time in a very gliding way. So this robot was very sophisticated. It actually used to build cars in a factory, and we re-engineered it to do this camera move. It took 4 weeks, took 2 weeks to set up, 2 weeks to shoot. We did lots and lots of tests. We had lots of disasters and things breaking. And weirdly, the only bit of animation in it is the toilet seat falling. That's 6 frames. And the rest is just a very slow frame at a time camera move. Yeah, and it was the most expensive shot in the film. We're guessing $50,000 to shoot that one shot. So yeah, we were always worried too that one shot would look good and the rest of the film would be a downer. But we got there.
Wow, that is certainly impressive. I was kind of curious. There are obviously a lot of repeated motifs throughout this film, with snails being one of the biggest ones. But your characters are also constantly reading throughout the movie. And so I was kind of curious if there was any sort of thought process of yours or decision-making process and kind of compiling those reading lists for every character.
Sure. Yeah, look, great question. I love reading. I have 3 things in my life. read, write, draw, and repeat. Read, write, draw. So reading's my, my escape. And all those novels in the film are my favorite books. And I've reread them many times. And I love classic literature because I'm always wondering how did that novel become a classic? What is in its essence that works? So The Grapes of Wrath is one of my favorite novels by Steinbeck, and but also it was very important in the film that it was never implied verbally, but what I was trying to say is that Gilbert and Grace's father, Percy, instills in them the importance of reading and how it can be a wonderful escape from your troubles, and that you can take a book anywhere in the world. And so that's what Gilbert and Grace do. They take their books with them and they find solace and comfort while they're separated. Of course, Grace goes down a road of reading trash and romance novels, but she comes back and she ends up reading the Diary of Anne Frank, and then it's Gilbert who discovers the ginger-chested pirate. So there's there's a lot of novels in there which I invented that don't exist. So particularly the ones Pinky reads, there's all sorts of crazy ones there. So yeah, I love books, and I always try and have them in my film somewhere.
All right, thank you. First, I would love to read The Ginger Chested Pirate at some point if that ever comes around.
Me too. I'll have to write it.
All the characters were absolutely amazing, all super well thought out. Personally, I really felt an affinity towards Pinky. And I believe in like past interviews, you've said like you base a lot of your characters on like people you know or like your own experiences. So I was wondering if Pinky was based on anybody. And then if you feel like those intergenerational relationships like between Grace and Pinky in the film are important.
Sure. Well, look, I'm very lucky. I have a lot of eccentric people in my life. I have a lot of older friends who've led very colorful lives and still do. And Pinky is an amalgamation of all of them, but in particular, two women, both American. And one of them, her name's Nancy Phelps, and she's an animation critic. And I met her at the Annecy Animation Festival years ago, and we're having a drink together, and she was telling me all about her life. She told me that she was one of the founders of the Burning Man festival, and that also she'd once played ping pong with Fidel Castro. And I said, "Oh, you're joking," but no, she did. Fidel Castro was actually a big ping pong fan, and so I thought I'm going to have to put that in the film one day. So I wrote that down. And then in Melbourne, where I live in Australia, in my apartment building, I have a friend who's called Pinky, and she's originally from San Francisco, and her family started the Ghirardelli chocolate empire. So she's had a very colorful life as well. She loves to swear, and she's in her 80s now, and she loves horror films. She goes to see a lot of horror films. So yeah, I just always draw from real life, the people that I know, my family and friends. But my films, I always say, aren't documentaries. They are works of fiction. And of course, I apply that rule, never let the truth get in the way of a good story. And I certainly embellish and invent and fabricate, because I think I'm not very good at writing from thin air. I can't just create a character from nothing. I have to steal from the people around me.
Do you feel like you just like draw these eccentric people into you, or like I'm curious how you know all these types of people.
I am too. I don't know what. I think we're just drawn to each other. I think we often feel like misfits and loners, and we sort of don't fit into the rest of society. Even within the film industry, I don't feel like I fit in. Even, do you know what? This morning, even at breakfast here at the hotel, I'm here at the Spark Animation Festival in Vancouver. So there's lots of famous animators here. Nick Park's here, and Disney, DreamWorks, and they're even down at the breakfast place. We're all having our breakfast. I'm sort of sitting in the corner by myself, feeling like even in the animation world, I don't fit in, which is fine, you know, but I think when you are somebody who feels different to the rest of the world, you are drawn to people who also feel different. Even at Christmas, we get together and have an orphans Christmas, because a lot of my friends have been rejected by their families, and so we all hang out together, protect each other, and celebrate each other as well.
I love that found family. Well, thank you. That was a beautiful answer.
Yeah, that's awesome. So the film obviously lines the line between like the human experience and that life, and then the process of a snail's life. Are there what inspired you to create a film based off of the process of a snail's life?
Sure. Well, originally it was Memoir of a Ladybird, and the first draft of the screenplay was Ladybirds. But then that film Ladybird came out, and I thought, oh, I'll have to start again. But it was also getting a bit, the script was getting a bit saccharine and cute and twee, and I thought, no, it's all going to be a bit nauseating. So I thought there must be a better creature or animal or bird or something, So I went through the whole animal kingdom, and I stumbled across snails, and then weirdly, a snail was one of the first things I ever animated at film school, and I collected snails as a child, so I've always had this fascination with them. And then I realized there was all these beautiful little metaphorical connections and symbolism, and that primarily, you touch a snail's antennas, and the snail retracts into its shell. And that's what Grace is doing her whole life. She's retracting from the world. She's retracting from the pain and trauma. So I like that connection. And then also I love the swirl on a snail's shell. It's such a beautiful visual motif that we could sprinkle all through the film. I mean, I'm surrounded by them. But also they're very symbolic of life going full circle and cyclic. I love films that sort of begin how they end. And so there was that connection. And then I discovered that snails can't reverse. They can only move forward. They can go around in circles, but they can't go backwards. And I love that connection with my favorite quote from Søren Kierkegaard, which is that life can only be understood backwards, but we have to live it forwards, which appeared in one of my student films, Uncle. And it's one of my favorite quotes. I'll probably have it on my tombstone when I die. But it's a quote I live my life by, and that's why I have it in the film, because it's very important that Pinky tells Grace about that to help her move forward and escape her trauma. So anyway, yeah, so there was that connection with snails as well, and also they're easy to animate, except for the blinking. The blinking's a nightmare, but moving them along is very easy. You just push them along, and then you leave Vaseline all behind them, and that's how we create their trails.
Awesome. Well, thank you.
Yeah, that's so cool. I also we've kind of brought this up a little bit, but the film obviously has a very distinct sense of humor. And there are so many little bits throughout the movie that I know you've kind of mentioned in previous interviews may have come up before you even had the story itself. Like for instance, the Fidel Castro with the ping pong. Like, I guess I'm curious, when you have all of these like comedic moments or little jokes and things that you want to incorporate into the story, whenever you're actually sitting down and writing the script and coming up with the story, how do you try and like pepper those moments throughout and keep that, humorous, melancholic balance?
Sure. Well, what I do is I have very detailed notebooks, and I collect quotes. I collect colors, smells, names. I have all these lists, and they're my recipe books. So once I've got the basic idea for the film, I'll go through and just find all these random things, so guinea pigs, an elderly woman tap dancing in a schnitzel bar, something about John Denver. Why, I don't know why I'm fascinated by John Denver. So you just find all these ingredients, and then you have to try and find a way of weaving them all together. And then it's all about getting a balance between the comedy, the tragedy, the light, the dark, because I'm very mindful. I don't want to depress the audience. So I do cram in as many jokes and moments of levity as I can. I mean, I always say if you're not an emotional wreck by the end of one of my films, then I failed. So I certainly want to exhaust the audience. I love that quote too. I've suffered for my art. Now it's your turn. So but I do want the audience to leave the cinema uplifted and full of hope and feeling nourished. Certainly don't want to depress people. I want to make the audience cry. I mean, that's good. But they're tears of joy, not sadness so much. But yeah, they're very tricky to write. They're very challenging to get that balance just so. I've got a wonderful editor who helps me, edit it all together, and I've also got a fantastic script editor who helps me at the front end get the story as polished as we can. Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, kind of along that same vein, I believe you stated that you had like 16 drafts of the film. I was wondering if there were any scenes that you struggled with taking out, or like if there were any like plot elements that were like drastically changed.
Well, yeah, I mean, originally Gilbert didn't come back. He died, and it was just too bleak. But the reason he died originally was I wanted to stress to the audience that you can move on in life, particularly if you're a twin. You can move on without your twin. You can become a whole person. And I didn't want it that Gilbert comes back and he's the missing piece of Grace. I didn't want it to be seen as that a woman needs a man to be complete or anything like that. I wanted Grace to be a whole person, to get on with her life. She goes to film school, makes a film. But it just was too sad. Gilbert just had to come back. So we reintroduced him. I can't remember what draft it was. But then again, I think the very first draft too was very, well, it was linear. So it was very chronological from birth to middle age. And my script editor said, no, it's too predictable. We need to make it more dynamic. Why don't we start in the present, go back to the past catches up to the present, and then we go into the future, which is a sort of a common structural way of writing. Films like Rocket Man is structured that way. So we did that. So that was a major structural change. But really, it was just finessing the plot, making it very, we didn't want it obvious that Gilbert was coming back. We had to sort of make that very discreet. And then just ironing out the dialogue and the voiceover. My films are very voiceover heavy, and that can become a bit overbearing at times. So we distill and pare back the dialogue as much as we can. The voiceover as much as we can, so that it's not too much. I use voiceover narration because our budgets are low, and it's a lot more economical to have the story driven by a voiceover. So yeah, there are lots of challenges. Writing is just one big challenge.
Thank you. I think that's it from us, Gavin.
Yeah. I do have one more, I guess, like maybe a two-parter question. But I guess to kind of end this off, what do you hope is sort of like the biggest thing that audiences will take away from this film? And then also, since this has been a movie that's been 8 years in the making and has really kind of consumed you creatively, what is next? Whether it be a creative endeavor or not, I guess I'm curious to know where you go from here.
Sure. Well, look, I think ultimately, as I said earlier, I want the audience to leave the cinema feeling a bit more positive about themselves and the world. If you look at all my films forensically, and I've only discovered this myself, psychoanalyzing myself, with the help of my psychoanalyst, is that what I'm trying to say with every film is that we are all imperfect. And in this film, the kintsugi is sort of a lot to do with that. The kintsugi bowls is that we are all imperfect, and it's about embracing your imperfections as well as other people's. And I did that in Mary Max. Max says, love your warts and all. And that, the characters in my films are perceived as weird and strange and eccentric, but I think we all are. We all are all a bit peculiar. We all have parts of ourselves we wish we didn't have. And we've got to stop trying to, strive for perfect bodies, perfect minds, perfect souls, that we are all somehow a little bit like Ken. We're all a bit damaged goods. We're all a bit broken, but as long as we care for each other and soldier on and move forward and try and make our little worlds, our little universes better, then I mean, that sounds all a bit gooey, but essentially that's what I'm trying to say with all the films. But in terms of the next film, I want to do a road film. I think I'm done with telling stories about people trapped in their bedrooms in suburbia. I really want to break free and do something more challenging, but still in the same style, aesthetic. Still, a film full of comedy and poignancy and tragedy at times. So yes, I've just started writing that. It's very early days. It'll be another, I don't know, 10 years. I don't know. I'll be probably dead by the time it's finished.
Well, we're very excited for whenever it does end up coming to fruition. But yeah, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. It's been a blast. Memoir of a Snail is fantastic. Everyone watching at home, please go check out the movie. It's in theaters now. And I don't really have much other to say other than you'll really enjoy it. It'll make you laugh and it'll make you cry.